Welcome, everyone, to Creating a Family. Talk about adoption and foster care. All right, everybody, start humming. I was going to sing it, but I'm not going to sing it, but be thinking like I am singing it. Sunny days sweeping the clouds away. You know, the Sesame Street song. Everybody be humming that? Good, because today we're taking a deep dive into, from my standpoint, one of the most exciting things that's happened at Sesame Street in a long time, and that is the introduction of a new storyline and Muppet that is in foster care. Today we're talking with Kama Einhorn. She is Senior Content Manager for Sesame Workshops U.S. Social Impact Group. Boy, that's quite a handful. She is one of the creators of the new Muppet, whose name is Karli, who lives with her foster parents, and Kama develops multimedia outreach material for children, parents, and providers. Welcome, Kama, to Creating a Family. I am so excited.
Thanks so much for having me. A pleasure to be here.
You know, I was trying to debate whether I also love Elmo's song, and I was kind of thinking, and my kids were saying, "Mom, don't sing any of them." So I decided, but I was kind of working last night in the shower on sunny days, and then I was alternating between Elmo's song. So,
How can you not?
well, I think the decision was probably a good one. It was all I could do, not to at least start off singing it. Like I said, for our community, the introduction of Karli, who is in foster care, living with her foster parents, is such a big deal because we have so many people who are foster parents or have been in foster care themselves, or have adopted from foster care. So it's an important topic for us. But I mean, if you look at the numbers of children in the United States in foster care, just even now, not to say how many have been in the last, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, or in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. It's a big deal. So what was the decision like? What goes into the decision of creating a new storyline, especially one that calls for a new Muppet?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Sesame Street has had a long history of serving vulnerable children and tackling tough topics. And Sesame Street and Communities is the hub of all of that work that we do around social impact and reaching the most vulnerable kids and families and communities. A few years ago, we launched a topic called traumatic experiences, which was a deep dive full of kid-facing and provider and parent-facing resources, a deep dive into the world of adverse childhood experiences through the lens of the ACEs study over the last several decades, which correlated so much long-term mental and physical health issues to early trauma. Through that sort of umbrella initiative, what came out from advisors, expert advisors, and local and national partners such as yourselves and community partners was the need for us to focus specifically on certain traumas, among them homelessness, which we launched in December. And here we see a need in the foster care community. We also knew that the numbers of children in foster care were growing and the system was so fragmented, and there was a real need for resources for kids and for parents and families coping with issues around being in care. So part of our task is to determine what topics we cover. Here it came to us from a previous initiative and from advisors and partners, the request, and sort of flagging for us the need for such a topic. And once we do figure out a topic, well, first of all, we need to depend on the generosity of our supporters, our philanthropic supporters. We need to figure out, which Muppet can really be this topic's ambassador? We've seen before, Elmo, when we did our outreach for military families, the challenges that military families face, we had him be the military kid, and we had his dad go overseas to do his job with his team, is the kid appropriate way that we described it. So in that one, Elmo was the ambassador. When it's not an existing Muppet that we all know and love, the core characters from the show, like Oscar and Grover, we can create one. So for this initiative, we created Karli, who is a 6.5-year-old Muppet and who can represent the experience, of course, not individual experiences, but who can represent the experience and the perspective of a child in foster care. So she was developed specifically for the initiative, and we consider everything from her age to what her voice sounds like, to the expression on her face, to her body language, and we want to present her in a child-friendly way that is, has the lighthearted, playful touch of Muppets while still addressing this serious issue, which she's a piece of the whole initiative. So she doesn't appear in every single piece on Sesame Street and communities.org, but we see her a lot. And overall, she serves as the ambassador and the representative for the topic.
So, how do you make the decision whether it's going to be an existing Muppet that we all know and love or a new Muppet?
Right. Yeah, it's a fascinating question, really. It depends on the topic. Sometimes it's very easy to give an existing character a backstory. With Elmo in military, that was a pretty big decision. With Big Bird, who represented the trauma initiative, that was a little more general because we never said the sort of trauma he'd experienced, and we simply said to children, we said, Big Bird was having a very hard time. He's having really big feelings, and here's his trusted adult friend to teach him this breathing activity. So when it's an existing Muppet, we choose a Muppet that will lend themselves well to the topic. For traumatic experiences, Big Bird has an innocence and a vulnerability, yet also a sort of protective quality that we knew kids would really respond to because we've seen that in focus testing. And we knew he could work in the different materials that we were creating around traumatic experiences without having to name, this particular trauma happened to Big Bird. With Foster Care, it was a really different story because to create a backstory for an existing character with this heavy a piece, this heavy a plot point, wouldn't really be appropriate for a wider audience. So then it's up to us to create the perfect Muppet to do so. And that process is pretty intriguing and often a lot of fun.
Yeah, I want to hear about that process, but let me stop and make sure that we're clear. So Karli, in this storyline, is on Sesame Street and communities.org. It is not on, am I correct on this? It's not on the regular Sesame Street show.
Exactly. Most people know Sesame Street from the show, of course. Many of us listening, I'm sure, grew up on it. But what people don't know is that we're a nonprofit. And then our mission has always been to serve vulnerable kids and families and to help kids grow smarter, stronger, and kinder. So that's what the social impact group, my group, that's what we're all about. And all of our materials live on Sesame Street in communities.org, which is completely free and bilingual. And once in a while, the characters that we've developed for these initiatives on the site make their way onto the actual broadcast show, which, if you will turn on HBO, you see. An example of that is Julia from the Autism Initiative.
Yeah, that's new too, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty new, a couple of years. The response to her, the public response to her was so it was so far reaching that there was a lot of interest in having her on the show. So we'll never know in advance, which characters will make it onto broadcast. Obviously, we want these lovable Muppets to make their way into as many homes and hearts as possible. But we get them going, and we get them out there into the on the site and out there into communities. And we find that kids really that they have sort of a direct line to the hearts of kids and of course many adults, and they're able to often do what humans can't do, right? They can tackle these heavy topics with this light touch and do it using through a child's perspective, and there's not that many materials out there to do that. And so we're in this unique position of being able to use our media to leverage that power to really get kids where they live, where they need it the most. So it's Muppet power.
Yeah, Muppet Power. Yeah, t-shirt idea. We got a question from Angela. She says she's curious if the creators had personal experience with the foster care system.
That's a very good question. Of the small group of in-house content developers, I do not believe so. I can't speak for everyone else. However, we work very closely with advisors We have a panel of 8 expert advisors. Several of them are foster caregivers themselves, and I believe at least one has had personal experience as a child. The other important piece of this is that research is sort of the lifeblood of Sesame Workshop, and all of our materials are focus tested several times with several different groups. So we bring this material to the adults, to the foster caregivers, and to the providers who are serving them, and we have them critique and provide feedback and recommend changes on every piece. Now, these are adults who have worked very closely with many children in the system, and they're expert empaths. So we look to them to give us feedback on how accurately and sensitively we are. How our messaging is for kids, how we're presenting the child's perspective. I will say that there are certain initiatives that we have, such as military families, grief, childhood grief, divorce, where many more of us have had personal experiences with that particular trauma. And our hearts are really in what we do. And when it's a very direct personal connection, it's even more charged. And I think it always makes the work better. So in general, while we haven't necessarily had experience directly with this topic, we're looking to the people who do, and
Right.
And always trying to sort of channel the hearts of the children that we hear so much about and that we aim to serve.
All right. So a year or so ago, when you were working on the trauma informed storyline, you came up with certainly one of the major forms of trauma that children experience in the United States is foster care. So you came up with kind of the seed, the kernel of the idea then. So then what happens? You start thinking, first of all, but there's so many other types of trauma
Sure.
and types of so many other deep, heavy issues
Sure.
affecting children. So how do you select amongst all of those? Which one bubbles to the surface, and how does that process work?
Yeah, it's a great question. Our emphasis is always going to where the need is becoming more and more obvious, and where we keep hearing from the field a call, a request for certain materials. So we'll hear from advisors in the field. We'll hear at conferences when we go present at conferences. We'll find, gee, 10 people just came up to me and asked us to address this topic. So it's like that kind of anecdotal feedback that really matters. It's also what we see on social media. We put something out there and people will comment, oh, that's really great. So glad Sesame is doing this, but I really wish they would address, X. That combined with statistics that come out, especially ones that are very public, because as we do rely on philanthropic funding, that's a factor in what we do.
Sure.
So we always have, in our hearts, we always have a list of what we want to tackle, and unfortunately, the list remains, and we'll keep going, we'll keep busy, for our entire careers, and we're grateful that we've been able to do the stuff we have and have that inform any new topic that will roll out.
Well, not that I represent the entire world of communities associated with foster care, but from the very bottom of our heart, we are thankful that you chose this topic and that you chose Karli, because she is just perfect. And Elmo is just the perfect ambassador. I guess ambassador is not the right
Thank you.
word, but
No,
he's the
no, they
perfect
are.
friend.
They certainly
Is
are.
that
No, and thank you so much. And I want to say, like, the honor is ours. We are not the ones in the front lines. We are not foster caregivers. We are not serving foster children and their families. And we have deep respect for the work y'all are doing. And really, it's a privilege to be able to serve you.
Okay, so now now we know how that topic kind of bubbled up to the surface. So you know that this is involving trauma. Is the next step to kind of dig deeper and figure out which specific points you want to talk about that might be relevant to foster care and relevant to foster children? Quite frankly, that's of course the real focus. Is that the next step, and is that part of your discussing with foster parents? What are the biggest pain points for children? What is the biggest misunderstanding? Is that the process that you next go through?
Yeah, pretty much. We have lots of steps, and we generally follow the same process for each difficult topic, or really any topic. So first the decision is made to create it, and that the funding is a piece of that, and then we convene an advisory board. And that's essentially, we do a national search for the best and the brightest in the field. And they can be from any sector. And we usually have a balance. So we have people working on policy, on advocacy. We have academic researchers. We have the practitioners who are right there on the ground every day in the field. We will have a variety of those providers. We have even journalists who have covered the issue extensively and have kind of made it their thing. And the goal of these advisories is to give us, it's a wonderful perk of the job to learn so much in a few days about something that you've known nothing about, because none of us were experts in this topic. It's essentially like a college course, and we get to learn from the best and the brightest in the field. And they give us a snapshot of what the issue is today, the prevalence, the challenges, the causes, the impact, and we also really need to get from them what works. So what are research proven strategies to help serve kids and families and providers? What are some experimental strategies that are promising? What models are promising that we should look to? And the ultimate goal is to boil all of this amazing content that they've handed us down into messages. So once we land on a message, that's when we begin developing a wide range of content. And by message, I mean,
Yeah, what do you mean?
yeah, how do all of these huge ideas and all of these statistics and we have so much content from the advisors. We have transcripts that are really long. Eventually, we develop an advisory report, and then from that we develop a curriculum outline and a content outline. But our job, really, coming out of that advisory, is to figure out what we are saying to our audience, right, and how we are saying it, because we're getting some high level information from advisors, and our Sesame job is to systematize it, right? So a good example is the Autism Initiative, right? We had a
Mhm.
lot to learn about autism. There were many different organizations with many different approaches, right, and many different goals. We thought, as Sesame, what can we take from all this information from the experts? What we came down to, they kept telling us, neurodiversity. There's, something that kids need to hear is that every child is unique, and that's what makes the world special. Well, that's a really Sesame idea. We've been doing that from the
Mhm.
beginning.
Yeah,
But when we
that's basically
right,
that is the essence of systematizing.
right. And and what all adults who work with children truly feel, right?
Mhm.
So the message, the overall message that sort of held the whole initiative together was see amazing in all children. And that really got to the heart of what we were trying to say. And it's about inclusion, right? And it's about building bridges of awareness, teaching neurotypical kids how to understand a child with autism and how to make friends with that child. So Julia did that really well. And, modeling Julia and Big Bird, actually, her first friend, modeled those strategies really well. So the messaging that we wound up boiling down from foster care is, there were a few small sort of sub messages, and in the material, you keep seeing certain themes repeated in different ways by different, characters in different media. You're not alone was a big one. It's not your fault was another big one. And we slowly unfold those important messages over over a variety of materials. And once we determine the message and we have an idea of what we want to actually create, then we take it to focus testing. And we ask the people themselves, the users, the audience themselves, their response to what they're seeing and what they're hearing. And we get a lot of course, positive responses, because everybody wants materials to support children and to enrich their own their own lives and practices. But we also get really important feedback. A lot of times it's about specific language, like a specific term that we're using or not using, that we're simply not getting it right. So in foster care, the example is we were saying foster parents through all our materials, all of our descriptions of what we wanted to do, or we were saying foster caregivers perhaps, and an advisor said, yes, that's accurate, and adults would certainly recognize that term, right? But
Mm-hmm.
but it's not kid friendly, and there's a real stigma, as all the listeners know. There's a stigma around the label, right? And it stings. It's a stigma that stings. And the kid friendly word that this advisor suggested was your for now parents, or there was an alternate, but we wound up using your for now parents,
Mm-hmm.
which was an easy way to explain to a child that this is what's happening right now. And the advisors helped us with this language of explaining to kids, this is a piece of your story, right? And this is where you are right now because mom or dad is having a hard time and is not able to take good care of you right now. So these caring adults, these other adults who care about you, are going to do that for now. Because we also heard from advisors and from everyone in the field that we spoke with that that there was no predicting the trajectory of a child's
Mm-hmm.
story. That
Exactly.
multiple placements, the whether or not a reunion with the birth parent happens, and it was very difficult to be straightforward and honest with children when they ask these heartbreaking questions, because we don't, the adults who care don't really have the answers, right? So we knew that we had to stress the concept of for now, and we have many other goals within the initiative. We have some strategies like expressing one's feelings, and the storybook focuses on that. I would say we've got about 5 strategies that we sort of hit again and again, in terms of what we model.
Let me pause now to remind everyone that you are listening to Creating a Family, and today we're talking about how the new Sesame Street character, Karli, who is in foster care, how that came to be. I want to let you know that this show is underwritten by Jockey Being Family Foundation. Since 2005, they have been a leader in providing post-adoption support to strengthen adoptive families for successful futures. Jockey Being Family connects adoptive parents and children with education and resources to help prevent failed adoptions. All right, now you've talked about the storyline. Let's talk about creating the Muppet. You said earlier that everything goes into, obviously the voice, but also you were saying the age, I'm sure the gender, the facial expressions, the body language. So how does that, I guess the easier parts of that would be age and gender.
Yeah,
So let's start with that. But
sure.
then I want to go further. I want to know more about how Karli came to be Karli.
Yeah, she's a lovely little Muppet. She's a very special little girl, and she has a lightness, that sort of belies her chaotic and traumatic past, which we don't go too far into. Age is a really important piece of it because obviously most Sesame Street watchers are on the younger side, right? They're not yet 6, because our viewers tend to be younger. There's a lot more, as kids get older, there's a lot more, there's a little more
Mm-hmm.
competition for their attention. We need a Muppet that can articulate herself around these issues and that can teach the younger kids. So often our Muppets for these special topics are around 5, 6, or 7, because
Mm-hmm.
they have a level of articulation that can really help. And
Mm-hmm.
yet they're still childlike. In terms of gender, we knew that was 50-50. It just so happened that that the Muppet that was being developed sort of lended itself to a feminine look. Her face is, we talked a lot about how we wanted her face to be open. We wanted her to be able to have a kind of confidence in her facial expression and her body language. There's not always a lot of expression that you can add to a Muppet's face. You can control the features. You can control the eyes and the mouth, sometimes the nose, I believe. But really,
Can they control? They have that much control over the actual facial expressions?
if there's eyelids, you can control the eyes. Mouths always, of course, because they're speaking,
Yeah,
right? But
yeah, they're
often it's
speaking,
the
right?
puppeteer who brings in the spirit of the character and gives the character body language. So in autism, you saw that Julia had a certain stiffness and a certain awkwardness that you might see in a child with autism. Her gaze, her eyes didn't look directly at the viewer. She usually averted her gaze, and that was feedback that we got from the advisors. She is unique, right? And she does stand out a bit, and you could see that fairly subtly in her character. With Karli, we wanted her to be able to be the vulnerable person that she is, right? Because this is what she's going through right now, and this is just what's real. But we also wanted her to have enough playfulness that made so because she was a real kid, right? Whose real job really was to be a kid and to play with the others. In an ideal world, she would get to do that. So all of those things went in. We also showed she has these sort of feathery pigtails. I'm not sure you've seen, they're sort of toward the top of her
Mhm.
head, and they flow really, there's a very sweet way that they flow. We thought that the pigtails conveyed that she was cared for. It's something that we heard from the field, that a lot of times children in homes that are in crisis, children who are experiencing trauma there'll be physical signs of neglect. And that one of those things was their hair, and their
Mhm.
clothes, of course. So we wrote this into her backstory, that there was a neglect situation going on. We don't ever hear this in the kid facing materials.
Mhm.
So you don't really see that on the site. But we wanted her to look, now in the present, we wanted her to look really well groomed and really cared for in a really kid appropriate way, right? So she has like the colors in her hair, and I think there's a little bit of like sparkle woven in. Somebody really took time and showed
Mhm.
up for this child and nurtured her in a way that would mean something to her, and then the viewers in turn will see something really sweet, and positive reflected back at them. Somebody having the same experience as them, who is now in a healthier and happier position. And that shows in what she looks like.
Did you make up more than one Muppet to represent Karli and then focus test it to see which one was more took more attention to the audience paid more attention to?
Muppets are often focus tested, yes, but Karli was not, because she seemed to develop really really beautifully on her own. We did show advisors, and she does evolve. She did evolve during her whole creation. She was a different color actually, and it has to do with which materials are available, which sort of raw materials for the different, we call them builds, the Muppet builds. And they're different. There's range of eye choices. You could see eyelids, or you could not see eyelids. You could see eyelashes or not. So we wanted to go for the subtlety of expression in her eyes.
Mhm.
We didn't want her to look goofy. So if we saw a version that was all about humor, certain Muppets just look goofier than others, right? Like
Yeah.
Grover can have a really goofy face, so can Elmo, and
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
lot about the sort of bouncy joy of that character. We wanted Karli to have the joy of a child, but also to do the heavier lifting, right, around this heavy topic. So yeah, we go through a lot of iterations. This one we did not focus test, although we shared her with the advisors, who were very pleased and excited to see how she was evolving, because she was sort of a twinkle in all of our eyes until the Muppet builders started bringing her to life. And then when
Yeah.
we see the Muppeteers on the set, when we see them first put the Muppets on their hands and breathe life into them, and they become real characters, right? And you forget about
Mhm.
the human puppeteer under there doing all the work. That's really when the thing becomes magic, and when we start to see, oh, there's Karli.
Oh, I bet. I bet that's exciting. Uh, do the is the puppeteer also the voice?
Yes, always. Yep.
All right. So did that go and how do you choose the puppeteer? I would assume choosing the voice would be so, because that is how we recognize Karli.
Totally. Yeah, we do audition for that. And there's usually, maybe there's 4 puppeteers who audition, and they do a performance with the Muppet on them. So we hear the voice and we see the body language and the spirit that they're bringing to the Muppet. And it's a lot of discussion about the approach to the character, and just like you would when you were casting a human for a live action human movie or TV show. So yeah, there's a rigorous casting process, and they're experienced Muppeteers. Many of them have worked with other Muppets, but it's really exciting when a Muppeteer gets their first character of their own, right? Because there are Muppets that are sort of extras, that don't have names, that are sort of might just be there in a group of Muppets, but haven't
Crowd scenes.
exactly.
Yes.
They don't have their own puppeteer. They don't have names. They don't have their own personalities. So to see a puppeteer, an experienced puppeteer who's worked with the Muppets for a long time come into their own character is really something magical.
Well, I would think that, I mean, where would people get experience outside of Sesame Street in being a puppeteer? I mean, I'm sure there are places, but it can't be very many. So when you do a casting call, is it more an internal casting call?
I believe it's both. Although the Henson Company does have a large and precious bank of experienced puppeteers who have sort of come up within that culture, within the world of Jim Henson and his legacy. And many start very, very young and are groomed, and learn everything that they know from the senior Muppeteers, and then you see those people grow into masters.
Oh, I bet that would be exciting. And so this, the puppeteer that is Karli, that is this person's full-time gig, or are they still doing other puppets because Karli is not a full-time job?
That's correct. Yeah, it's not full time. In fact, it was, I believe, 2 days of shooting for all of the Karli video that we did. So yes, this puppeteer, whose name is Haley, and she's wonderful. She has other work, and hopefully a lot more of Karli in her future.
Yeah, we certainly hope so. We're rooting for you, Haley. Full-time employment for Haley. Yay. I also absolutely love the song "You Are Safe." Again, I'm going to spare everyone and not sing it, but "You are safe, you are strong, there is a place for you here." Who wrote that? I'm probably putting you on the spot.
Isn't it beautiful? No, not at all.
It's so beautiful.
I've worked very closely with this writer for many years, and she's done a lot for Sesame. Her name is Samantha Berger. She wrote the script, and she also wrote the song.
Oh, really?
And it just came to her, and she sang it into the producer's voicemail, and the song is almost unchanged from the original, that original voicemail, and it's in harmony, and you hear the 4 characters. And when we first heard that on the set, it was like the air just changed. Like it just became this hallowed space. And people were just speechless. And I believe they had never sung it together before, in this 4-part harmony. So it was this kind of magic. To me, it seemed perfect on the very first take. Of course, we do everything a million times, and everybody weighs in, because everybody's really thinking about every note. But that song has become, the most, I think, evocative, and it's been a real standout piece for the whole initiative. A lot of times I have it in my head. And just
me too, worm ear.
Right? The message is it's so tender, and it's so simple. It's just, there's a place for you. You belong. And I think everybody, regardless of whether they've coped with the foster care system, it's this human drive, this human need, this basic,
a human need,
very primal need to belong. And I think it really resonates with viewers. You usually see people tear up when they when they watch it, and I still do sometimes, even though I've heard it many, many times.
Yeah. And now I'm sure the puppeteer is not the one singing,
Oh, no, they are.
Karli's voice.
They are.
That
Yeah, the
puppeteer is the
puppeteers are
voice
singing. Yep.
is singing?
Yep.
Oh my
Yeah, the
gosh.
puppeteers are singing.
And, I'm blanking on the foster mom's name, but, oh, her voice is
Isn't
gorgeous as
it?
well.
That's Dahlia. Yeah, the puppet
Dahlia
is
and
named
Clem,
Dahlia,
right.
Dahlia and Clem. Yeah, and we named them. We wanted to give them symbolic names. So Dahlia, I believe, is something along the lines. One of the meanings, and it might be there might be sort of a twist on it, is a strong branch. And Clem is about kindness, the derivation of that name. And Karli is strong. Karli means strong.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes, it's a
So
German
all the
derivative.
puppeteers are the ones who are singing
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, yeah.
And doesn't Elmo sing on that song as well?
He does. Yep. There's
Yeah.
this beautiful 4-part harmony, and we have a music supervisor who's down on the floor conducting them as if one would conduct a choir or an orchestra. So to hear them with that 4-part harmony and it's got a sort of a round feel to it.
It does.
It just the way it came together was just really magical, and we knew it was exactly what it needed to be for this initiative.
So when you're casting not only for the ability to be a puppeteer, which having never done it, but I'm assuming that's not easy, and you're casting
It's so much
for
harder than it looks.
I'm not very coordinated, so it would be definitely harder for me. It looks hard for me.
It really is.
Yeah, no, that looks very hard to me. And then, but it's also acting. I mean, so they have to act. They actually have to be coordinated enough
Yeah.
to do the Muppet,
Yeah.
and they have to sing.
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
There can't be a lot of people
It,
that can do all those
really,
things.
and it's also so much more physically demanding than I had imagined. Before I first stepped foot on the set, because they're on the ground. They're often rolling around, like on dollies, and they're often smushed together. So the humans, so they have to sort of move as like one organism. And that's really something to see, but they're also holding their hands up and for a long, long time.
Oh man, that would be
Yeah,
hard.
right. And Big
Yeah.
Bird is like the perfect example of how physically demanding it was, because he's 8.5 feet tall. So the puppeteer has to have his hand up in the head of Big Bird, and plus the big heavy suit. So it's really demanding. And when you look at how physically taxing it is at the end of a day, and you see the puppeteers and what they've been doing at the end of the day, and it's really a workout.
Oh, I can really imagine. I mean, if anybody has done much yoga, and there's parts of yoga where you're keeping your hand raised for a while,
Totally.
and they say 1 minute, and you're thinking, "Oh my gosh, this has been forever. This is a
Totally.
lot longer." I can't even imagine. I really can't. We have a question from and you talked about this topic before, and this is from Darren. He says, "I love Sesame Street and the Muppets, and I think it is amazing that this character has been introduced. So thank you. I appreciate that every child's story is different, but Karli seems to be about returning to the birth family.
Mm-hmm.
Karli's, meaning her story,
Yeah.
seems to be about returning to the birth family one day. This is obviously not every child's story. Were concerns ever raised that this may give children hope of returning to their birth families, where there may not be that may not be their personal situation?"
Mm-hmm. It's such an important question, and one we did talk about for a long, long time with our trusted advisors. With these difficult topics, and this comes up in every difficult topic, because they're Muppets, and because we want to present information in a child-sensitive way, but we also want to model the best case scenarios. So a lot of this is first of all, modeling to adults, right? The adults are seeing this, and they might be taking away some strategies that the Muppet foster parents are using. And if they just take away one thing that they can use to make a child's experience more positive, then we've succeeded, right? There's a strange balance between like presenting a too rosy version, a too rosy presentation of what's really an incredibly traumatic, over long periods of time, trauma, that kind of topic, and showing how things could be, right? How to bring the most positive possibilities to bear in what you're sharing to kids, and giving them giving them the hope, giving them the optimism, the thought for a better future. We learned from advisors that the goal, when it's possible and when things work out, and we all know the sad truth that it does not, that the goal psychologically for the child, if it's safe, is reunion with the birth parent. That the biggest trauma that most children in care have experienced, is the removal of, of the child from the home. And that no matter what that parent has done, the usual scenario is the child does not want to be removed, right? And would like to protect that parent. So we had to strike it was a very difficult balance. We didn't share very much of Karli's backstory, except that her mom was having a hard time and couldn't care for her well. So she was getting some grown-up help, right? That it wasn't Karli's fault. She was getting grown-up help. And that for now, these adults were going to take care of her, because we all know that the most basic need of a child, right, is to feel physical and emotional safety, to feel cared for, to feel seen and heard. So regardless of what happens in her future, we wanted to show that the present of her life, and how she was lucky enough, right? Of course, in many ways, very unlucky. But that right now in this moment that we're seeing her, she's safe, she's loved, she's cared for, and these adults are going to see her, to hear her, to help her express her biggest feelings. And we know that no matter how a viewer child's life plays out, that that moment of being cared for, and also having some, learning some self-care strategies, that will serve all children regardless of their experiences.
At this point in time, she is safe, she's strong, and there's a place for her.
Yes.
Yeah, and there was a really interesting discussion on one of our online communities about this topic. Darren had raised it about and I thought Kim had a good point. And this is from Kim. She said, "We've had 21 foster kids, and 20 have been returned to family members. I am so thankful that this story I am so thankful that this is the story they appear to be showing. There are lots of films with characters being raised by non-biological parents, but they rarely show reunification." So I think that Kim raises which is a supportive point of what you. Will there be a reunification storyline with Karli?
Funny you should ask. I'm happy to be able
Breaking
to
news, everyone!
I'm
Breaking
happy to
news.
be able to share. And Dawn, I'm not sure if you knew this yet either, but it was announced in some of the articles and the stories that came out in response to the Foster Care Initiative. In the fall, we're going to be launching a similar initiative on Sesame Street and communities.org around addiction. And it's for children with parents who are struggling with addiction, and the children coping with the effects of that. That ambassador is going to be Karli.
Oh,
Yes.
good. It's funny because when I was talking with some of your folks, I mentioned to them that, what you said, a lot of people do this. I didn't realize it was so common. I was playing to the standard there, but I mentioned that another really important topic that ties in is addiction. But they were mum. They did not
Yes,
tell me that.
a sad overlap. We know.
Yeah.
So we knew that Karli, of course, could have this long, coherent narrative, and we created a backstory for her. And so once you see the addiction materials, you learn that we actually, strangely, we keep them separate, right? Because they're separate topics on the site, and we don't mention one in the other. And that's because we want them to stand alone, because everybody using them will not necessarily have this overlap, but a lot of them will. And if they're using both topics, it's going to be very clear to them, how it's going to help. So Karli's story is that her birth mom, was struggling with addiction, and Karli was living with neglect. And she wasn't being cared for well, because mom was really having a hard time with a grown-up problem. So Karli is identified by a teacher because she wasn't wearing the appropriate clothes. And again, this is only in the backstory. It doesn't really show up anywhere yet. she was clearly being neglected. She was identified by a teacher who, brought it to the school social worker, and she's placed in foster care. So she's in foster care for several months, and Dahlia and Clem, her for now parents, have cared for a number of foster children, and they knew, and Karli knew, that the ultimate goal was to reunite with her birth mom, who was in treatment for 3 months, and then when we get to the addiction topic, she's about to return home from treatment, and she's in recovery. So Karli is coping with the anxiety of having mom return. She's of course very excited to see her mom. She's also having lots of big feelings, right? Sadness, anger,
Mm-hmm.
anxiety, worry.
Mm-hmm.
She's struggling with her previous role of feeling like she had to take care of her mom and
Mm-hmm.
hide what was going on, and live with the shame, and just the responsibility that we know so many children in this situation feel.
Mm-hmm.
And we made the choice to not show the birth mom, because we actually do show a tiny glimpse, but we did not create a Muppet around her, because we felt that was another story that deserved telling really well, and that we wanted to focus on Karli's experience,
Mm-hmm.
sort of transitioning into this new chapter in her life and in her family's life. So we'll see her preparing for her mom's return. And we also are going to see her in conversation with human children who have lived through this, and are now on the other side. So Karli is, she's still in a vulnerable position, but her narrative arc is sort of clearly beginning to wind down to leave her and her mom in a much healthier and happier place.
So this will be a whole nother storyline that will be introduced in the fall.
Yeah. October.
And then we don't know, we have no idea whether Karli will ever appear again. Or do we know?
We always hope. And, we do rely.
We certainly hope.
Right. Yes, we rely on the generosity of our funders. So there's always more on our wish list. We always, we have ideas at the ready for what else we would want to do with her, and with other characters that really embody the resilience that we're trying to build in kids and families on the site.
You are listening to Creating a Family. Today we're talking with the creator of Karli, or one of the creators of Karli, the foster care or the foster child Muppet, or the Muppet who happens to be in foster care, on Sesame Street in communities.org. This show could not and would not happen without the generous support of our partner agencies. And when we call them partners, they are choosing, most of them are nonprofit as well, and they are choosing to take their dollars and support us and support our mission, which is providing unbiased education and support to pre-adoptive families, pre-foster families, and post-adoptive and foster families. Two of our partners are Vista Del Mar. They are a licensed nonprofit adoption agency with over 65 years of experience helping to create families. They offer home study only services as well as full service infant adoption, international adoption, and foster to adopt programs. You can find them online at vistadelmar.org. We also have Spence Chapin. They are an adoption agency in New York City, and they have a really wonderful mentorship program where they take adult adoptees and assign them to a mentee in their mentorship program to help the teen work through and think through some of the issues of adoption. It's a program that's been going on for a while. It is such a good program. So they're looking right now, they're recruiting for the fall for adults. They need adults age 21 and older. It's a volunteer position. The mentors will serve as role models to encourage mentees to ask questions feel comfortable with their identities, and develop healthy self-esteem. If you are interested, it really lends itself to people living in the New York, New Jersey, or Connecticut area. If you are interested, please contact them. It is such a strong program, and I honestly think it probably would help the mentors as much as it would help the mentees. But anyway, you can get more information at their website, spence-chapin.org. Um, Kama, who is your audience? When my children were younger and watching Sesame Street, I swear sometimes I thought, they're really talking to me.
Oh, that's
They're really
I
not
think we all
talking to
do.
my child. Um,
Yep.
and sometimes I squirmed
Yeah.
when I thought that. And when I watched this one, and I thought, or watched the first one with Karli, I thought, I think foster parents could be getting a lot out of watching Dahlia and Clem as well. So who is your audience?
It's a really great question, especially to ask about Sesame Street and communities.org, because the providers are often the gatekeepers of all of this material. And that's how parents and ultimately how children, receive it and how they benefit from it. So it's an interesting hybrid. The site has a lot of professional development for a variety of providers. So in that way, it's very adult facing for anybody serving kids in a professional capacity. The materials themselves, like most of the Muppet videos, a lot of the activity pages, and certainly the digital interactives, like the games, essentially. Those are kid facing. But we also know that it's all about engagement. It's all about the relationship of the caring adult to the child and the power of that relationship to really help kids grow smarter, stronger, and kinder. So when adults are watching with the kids, and we call that co-viewing, when they're really engaged, there's media, there's a screen, but there's something really important happening, and the adult can set it up with some questions and some little extension activities. When that co-viewing is happening, we know that the adult is watching what's going on. And if it's a foster parent watching Clem and Dahlia and the way they speak with Karli, the strategies they are modeling, then that's something that they're taking away as well, even though it's completely child appropriate, and the child is getting everything that we intended them to from the whole video. The parents are watching themselves as well and relating to their experience. And we found, I'm sure many of us here today have a favorite Muppet and one, a Sesame Street memory that sticks with them, and just, a certain character that has a place in their heart. We know that the Muppets have this special power to reach not just kids, but adults, and that we're all every age we've ever been, I like to say. And we all have that childlike place in us that connects with that character, and that just stays with us our whole lives. So when we're watching it, certainly I think all of my colleagues would share the sentiment. We're in it, in a way that we're not viewers out. We're not outside of it looking, the way, we're not trying to imagine how a viewer would see it, although we certainly are. We ourselves are right there with those characters in that community, and that still resonates with us. It's still really real. So yeah, it's the dual parent child audience, and everything that is sort of the basis of that, which makes Sesame Street and Communities really a special resource.
When you focus test, did you have a group of children watching it as well, or was it mainly just parents?
We didn't for this one. They do that for the show. They have they do children focus testing, and they measure, for instance, engagement. How kids are reacting physically and verbally, and with their gaze on the screen, and they test their understanding of the concepts. We often do that mostly in our impact study. So we call our summative research, basically, did it work? And it's different for every initiative. But we do look at children, how they're responding. But mostly it's about the feedback we get from the adults in their lives, that is simply reported by them. My child, started having fewer fewer meltdowns. I noticed that he's less overwhelmed by big feelings, after watching this video several times and having conversations about it. It's that kind of anecdote about the impact that we get. So, of course, the children are always first, front of mind.
So what is I'm curious, what is the impact you're hearing? You haven't had a lot of time,
Yeah,
but what is the impact?
it's all new stuff. So a lot of adults have shared their stories on our social media, and you can join Sesame on Facebook. You can join Sesame Street in Communities, or one just for providers is Sesame Street in Communities Providers, and share your stories. As many foster parents have, they've put up photos, and they've told their stories, their history as foster parents, and usually something about the children in their care or children who have been in their care. Most have been expressing gratitude and wishing
Mhm.
that they'd had resources like this, for in the past
Mhm.
for other children in
Exactly.
their care. We did hear one really touching anecdote where a child looked at Karli and made a comment like she's like me, she's in my, not using this word, but she's in my position, right? I'm just like Karli. And that's exactly the goal. We want kids to see themselves reflected in her.
Yeah, I think you will see that. I have certainly heard from foster parents. Um, I think the overwhelming uh, thing we're hearing is gratitude.
Yeah.
They are so grateful
Oh,
that this is a storyline, that this is a subject that's being talked about. And quite frankly, they're thankful that there are child facing materials, because although there are some, and we have a list of books available on our website, there needs to be a lot more. And so I think that's the overwhelming thing we're hearing is gratitude. So, what's in the future? What are some of the other big topics that uh, if you can tell us?
yes.
Addiction.
I
Okay,
think that
so
I have to
addiction we
hold.
know.
I think I have to hold 2020 close to the chest for now. But the addiction initiative will be launching in October. So I hope, I don't hope because it's really unfortunate, but I hope that many of the listeners will find that to be a useful resource as well. And every month or so we roll out with new topics, but they're not all the difficult topics. They're not all tough times, and difficult conversations is the sort of general term we use for them. We do a lot on early learning basics, ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, and we do a lot around health and wellness, and a lot about different kinds of families. We have about 27 topics up on the site right now, and about a third of them, possibly a little more, are about the difficult topics.
And the site you were referring to is sesamestreetincommunities.org. Is that where you would send people?
That's where you should go. It's all completely free, and it's all bilingual. It's available in Spanish, and you'll find a ton of resources for kids, families, and providers. And again, the professional development piece is really powerful, and you'll find that a link at the top. You can register as a provider, and you'll get information about webinars, online courses. Many you can get continuing education credits for those,
Okay.
as well as it's also searchable. So you can, if you only want to see videos, you search that way. If you want to search by a certain age group, you search that way. Search by topic, and so on.
And you can also pull up a specific video for your child right
Exactly,
there on that site as
exactly. And
well.
you can bookmark them if you register. You can bookmark your favorites.
And you mentioned that there were games. Can you just briefly
Yeah.
what are the games? I mean, are they the type that kids can play when you're on the phone and you hand them your tablet so that they will stop bothering you so you can carry on your conversation?
You can certainly do that, because
Speaking for a friend, not that I've
that's
ever done it.
reality. Yep. They all, they're really all designed for parent-child engagement, but we
Okay.
know the reality of life, right? So there's one in foster care, and everybody should play it because it's really excellent, and all the adults here love to do it. It's called Slow It Down. And it's you have 6 different choices, and it's meant as a calming activity, as if imagine a child in full meltdown mode needing needing a shift. Often, like a sensory activity can absorb them and kind of get them away from that hijacked feeling. So for instance, on the piece, they can choose from 6 different activities. One is like drawing in sand and stamping it and using a rake, and just a very, one of those like sand Zen garden type things.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's slime, which is awesome, where they can sort
Yeah.
of paint in slime, like move it around so it looks like they're actually playing in slime, and they can decorate it with certain things and make stamps, and they can write in it, they can write their name. There's some music making. There's a marimba, so they're playing certain tones. And there's a video option where you have 6 videos to choose from, and there's slow motion videos. So, you can get really mesmerized by watching some of those like time lapse videos of like a seed, in soil, and you watch the whole thing grow into a flower, and it's like you could watch it again and again, and it shows you. I mean, that's a speeded up version, but you can also see slow motion things like a drop of water dropping onto a surface of water, and how it bounces off, and how if you watch it in very slow motion, it's really amazing and really mesmerizing. And a child can control those videos, can make them faster or slower, and really just soothe themselves without words. So, we're not suggesting to the adult, a certain strategy for helping a kid in full tantrum mode. We're just saying, you might hand this over and ask children to pick an activity, and it can often provide some soothing, a sort of change of stimuli. It's just one tool, and it's an example of an interactive. It's not really a game because it's not gamified, but it's an interactive activity that's made like with the needs of these kids in mind.
And maybe a needs for the parents too.
Oh yes, everyone must. Everyone must.
Yeah, I'm thinking that this would be good for me as well. Well, thank you so much, Kama Einhorn, who is the senior content manager for Sesame Workshops USA Social Impact Group, otherwise known as Sesame Street and Families. Thank you so much for being with us today. To get more information about all the stuff that has been developed by Sesame Street for this initiative, go to their website, sesamestreetincommunities.org. I hope that we crash your site tonight.
I hope so too. And Dawn, thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure. And to all the listeners, thank you so much for all the work you do.